Hello there, how are you doing today? Welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison. My co-host today is Kristen Jensen. You thought I was going to say Beverly Marshall Sailing. No, today we're switching things up. Beverly Marshall Sailing is our guest today, who's been my co-host for the whole season. So we've been looking forward to this. I'm a little nervous because I really want to do right by Beverly because, well, obviously I care about her a lot because, well, that's why I had her be my co-host. Anyway, so thank you for tuning in. On Fireside, what we do is we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games. And this season, we've been focusing on Magic the Gathering. And Beverly has many times told me that the editors have the best stories. So we're going to test that today and see if that is true. I think it is. Beverly, thank you for being on Fireside. Again,
glad to be here.
For being the guest of Fireside, which meant switching chairs.
I know this is like a really weird joke. You're like really way louder now that you're closer to me. So that's strange.
Oh, okay. I am way louder. Maybe it's because I'm doing that voice
cool.
trait that Kristen taught me. I don't know. Anyway, so, well, okay. Well, as you know, we want to hear your stories, and where we like to start, as you know, is to learn a little bit about Beverly before Wizards of the Coast, before Magic the Gathering, before all this happened, and take us from where you were in your life up
take
into
us back.
Yeah, take us back.
Yeah. Well, the story of me being involved with Magic is the story of two weddings.
Story of two weddings. Yes. I love it.
Not Game of Thrones weddings, but, you know.
Not red weddings.
But the first one is Peter's first wedding.
My first wedding,
which was in May of 1990.
Okay.
And I was a bridesmaid at this wedding.
Yes.
And so I got to sit at the wedding party table where Peter was talking about this new company that he was starting called Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
This brand new adventure.
Yeah.
May 1990. And those of you who remember Wizards of the Coast history might have heard that the date May 1990. That's the day I always look back and say that's the day we started the company, Wizards. I don't know what the filings might say, but you know. Whatever.
It started in your hearts that day.
It started. I mean, it was like the month that we organized a first meeting where we're like, hey, let's have a meeting. Let's get all our friends together and talk about what sorts of games we can do. Yeah. Was in May of 1990. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So, so you're telling me all about this game company and you're talking about all the different people who are doing it with you. And I'm sitting there thinking in my head, I don't know if any of those guys have any publishing or writing experience at all. And so I said, well, hey, you know, I have this publishing arts certificate from Pacific Lutheran University, and I've done internships in marketing and editorial at Yale University Press.
Right.
And I've been doing some freelance academic editing. So, you know, I know how to do some stuff here, and if you need some help, give me a call.
Well, I mean, that was pretty odd, though, really. I mean, because you think about it, you know, we were a game company. We didn't have anybody with experience in game design. We didn't have anybody experience in marketing. We didn't have anybody with experience in sales. But it did kind of make sense. Maybe we should have somebody in the company who had some experience in education in something related to making games.
And I think that's one of the most special things about, especially early days of Wizards of the Coast, is that to me, as an outsider, right, it really seems like you hired people for passion and interest, right? And like that's not always what happens nowadays, right? Like people get hired for what school they went to and the last 5 jobs on their resume, and they may or may not have passion or interest in what they're doing. And so I think that's really what made Wizards of the Coast special.
Well, barely had 5 jobs on our resume.
Right, exactly, yeah.
One of them was probably babysitting.
Newspaper routes, stuff like that. Yeah.
So anyway, that was my first, entree into the idea of Wizards, and it wasn't that long after that you guys came to me with the first draft of the Primal Order, and then we kind of got started on this whole
Okay, so the Primal Order,
thing.
The Primal Order was the very first product that Wizards of the Coast published, and the first product we really started working on. We started working on several. We started Wizards. We were all role-playing nerds. We all wanted to do role-playing game products, and so the Primal Order was a supplement on how to incorporate mythology, deities, into any RPG system that you cared to play. I had started writing it just based off of, we had developed a system for this in our own D&D campaigns. So I started working on this with Kim McLaughlin and Russ Woodall and Steve Connard and CJ. And along comes, we're like, hey, okay, here, Beverly.
We need help. Help us, please.
It was like, oh no, it was here, we're done. You just have to like edit it a little bit now. Whatever, and the answer to that was no.
Right.
The answer to that was, this is so not ready for that.
Right. It's pretty much done.
Yeah. I have to admit, Beverly is telling the truth here. We really, I think I knew maybe it needed a little more work, but yeah, I think it's ready for editing. Isn't that what editors do? Is fix it?
It had some serious structural issues and a lot of stuff. And I just said, you have to rewrite this whole thing. And here's like 5 pages of notes on what you have to do different.
Wonderful. And so Beverly did this for you. And at this point, were you hired, or was it just this was a friend? No. You offered editing.
This is
here.
This is a hey, you're helping us out, right? And so
sure. Well, and that's what most of Wizards started with, right?
Right, yeah. And so I'm doing stuff. I think at some point it turned into getting paid in stock, which
sure,
yeah,
turned out to be a really good thing.
Yes.
But at the time it wasn't actual monies.
Right. It was actual money.
And I ended up giving up all my other freelance work to do this.
Wow.
So it was like, okay, good thing I have a day job,
Yeah.
Yeah, and Beverly's notes were, we kind of hung our heads in shame and like, oh, okay, yeah. There were immediately, it was obvious she was right. It was like you couldn't argue with it. It was like,
right.
Oh, wow, okay, this makes a lot of sense. I think we better push off our release date. We were going to originally thought we would release about a year earlier than we actually did release. And so we went back and worked on the Primal Order, and you ended up helping us so much on Primal Order that you ended up getting writing credits along with it was a really big team project.
There are like 6 different people involved in the rewrites that all just rewrote big hunks of it. So
right. I remember at one point it looked so dry that somebody said, this book is so dry. And so we had David Howe become a writer and just go through and do just go through and make it funny. Just add humor, Dave. Add humor, and he did and stuff.
And it was really good that way. Yeah.
But it worked out. So
then that kind of went on for the next year.
Okay. Right. Like, help us, Beverly. Sure, here's my notes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get to August of 1991, which is the second wedding, which was my wedding. And Peter came to my wedding directly from Dragonflight.
Yes.
Where he had been meeting with Richard Garfield.
Oh, sure.
And had just heard for the first time
about this new game.
About this magic idea that Richard had.
The story that's been told many times in different, for the first time Richard and I met, and him explaining the idea of a collectible card game, which occurred during Dragonflight 1991. Yes.
And so, just to get context, how far away was your wedding between your meeting with Richard and
days at most?
Days. So do you feel like Peter was really excited about this, or was he more trepidatious, like, oh, this is a thing that might be cool? Or
he was super excited about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it turned into this whole, we have to make sure that we get Primal Order, and we had Talos Lana stuff by then going on too, and that we get these things out the door so that we can live.
Until we can live and breathe until this new game.
Until we can get magic out, we have to make sure the company functions and doesn't go under or anything.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So so it was, I don't know, 2 weeks or so after I got back from my honeymoon, that Peter called me up and said, hey, could you work faster if we paid you?
Wouldn't this be a possibility? If we paid you in money.
Yeah, exactly.
If we paid you in money. Yeah.
So I gave notice at the day job, and I think I started October 1st, which
that sounds about right.
Which would have made me paid employee number 2.
Yeah, because the first was Lisa Stevens, right? Okay.
Yep. So you came in, and you ended up helping us a lot of our RPG products. But I think we want to get into Magic the Gathering, because this had to have been pretty close to the time when we first got playtest decks, or that was a little bit later. That would have been 90.
Yeah, that was later because 91. Richard had just told you about
yeah,
the
in
concept.
summer 91. But I think by the fall or late fall 91, we were getting playtest decks for Magic
and that
the
was
Gathering.
very fun.
Yeah, so what was your reaction to Magic the Gathering sort of? I mean, I had mentioned it to you conceptually, but the first time you saw playtest cards, or actually through that period, what were your early thoughts about Magic the Gathering as you were learning about it?
Well, I got taught how to play it, and that was a lot to get my head around at first because it wasn't like anything I'd ever played before.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I haven't really been a whole lot of a strategic gamer. I've mostly been I was almost exclusively a role player before that.
Right.
So.
Right.
And there's no,
like most of us were in that time. A few of
yeah.
us played other board games, but Wizards was heavily
And
leaning
to
toward
be fair,
RPGs.
Magic was completely unlike any game anyone had ever played before, right?
Right, but it was just that it was a highly strategic kind of game. I mean, and role playing role playing can be strategic, but you can also sort of fuzz
it's
your
a
way.
longer it's a longer commute from an RPG than it is from,
Totally.
say, Cosmic Encounters or other
Poker
board games
or,
or card games that Richard has cited as influence.
So it took me a little bit to kind of get the hang of what was going on, but I finally figured out it's just you play it a lot and then you figure it out. You just keep doing it, and you sort of let all the different.
I think that's pretty good
wash
advice
over
for
you.
Magic players today.
Yes, play it a lot.
Actually,
You'll
for
get
many
it.
things in life,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
And so I used to live not that far away from Dave Howell, and so we would gather up our laundry and take it to the laundromat, and then we'd sit and play test Magic while the laundry was going on. And
Sure.
Dave
All
Howell,
the-
who was a friend of ours, who
Dave Howell again.
did
He's
several
a-
things in the history of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, he was a typesetter.
He typesetting. He wrote Primal Order with us,
Okay.
and yeah, he.
But at this point, we were also considerably worried that somebody else was going to steal this concept, before we could get it out, because we knew it was going to be a while. And so even though, so we're sitting here playing this thing in the laundromat, and then people would come over and say, "Hey, what are you playing?" And we'd be,
Nothing. Nothing. We're playing with baseball cards.
Move
Yeah.
along. Nothing to see
well,
here.
and we had one guy convinced that it was a Calvin and Hobbes game.
Oh, because there was so much Calvin and
Because there was
Hobbes
a lot of
art
Calvin and
on the
Hobbes art on the
on the
cards.
playtest cards, because Richard made these cards, and because it was just for private use, it wasn't
Yeah.
for commercial
Right.
use. You could use any art you wanted. So on the playtest
Sure.
cards, he had Calvin and Hobbes art,
Oh,
and
that's too
Dungeons
funny.
and Dragons
Star Trek.
art, and Star Trek art.
Oh,
yes,
that's too
and stuff
funny.
like
I
that.
love that.
So yeah, these guys
yeah,
at the laundromat were just sure that we were making some kind of Calvin and Hobbes game, and
You didn't dissuade them
we
otherwise.
did not. But that's. I really did enjoy playing it.
Yeah.
I mean, we all kind of sometimes ended up playing it more than we were really.
And so
strictly
then how did
required
that,
to.
so you started playtesting, you got your head around it, and then how did that translate into like actually making the real cards that are coming, the first print, the alpha print, right?
Right.
So most of the cards came to me from the East Coast playtesters.
Sure,
I mean,
okay.
Richard had been working with them to get it all developed out, but they were the ones that I was interacting with to get it. And I would get it as, basically a Word file
Okay.
with the text, the mana symbols would be, RR or...
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
And,
Whatever.
and you were the only editor
Right.
at the time. Everything having to do with Magic, original Magic, went through your went under your pencil. Yeah, and so all the original cards. And I think one of your big tasks was figuring out how to organize or write the rules or edit.
I did not write them.
Yeah,
Well, there was a whole lot of... That was another thing that got rewritten a lot.
Right, the original Magic. I remember you struggled a lot with the original Magic rules.
Yeah, and it was hard because, again, it was a thing that nobody had ever done before.
Right.
And just trying to figure out what order do you explain the parts in.
Right.
Because if you're teaching somebody to play, And in person, you can just say, okay, well, we're going to lay this out this way, and and then I'll show you how things go as we
but
play
how do you write that for the first time?
But yeah, you can't do that in a rule book. And so we had all this stuff about, okay, well, Richard wrote that story about the Warzel, the wizard, and trying to give context for how it worked, and then.
Can I pause on this really quick? So this is something I don't think I've heard before. So what I think you said is that Richard Garfield created a story behind magic before the stories that we have now, like with the Planeswalkers, the story building.
I don't think it was like a world story. I think it was an example,
well,
right?
It was sort of, it had like a little bit of a world story because it was trying to give context for what you were doing in the games.
He's giving context.
The Wizard Warzel summoning these creatures and they're doing this and that. And it was kind of a way to give you the sense of what was the metaphor.
Instead of like, here's these cards, do something with them, and you're like, why? Okay, sure.
That ended up getting cut, I think, out of the second version because it was just too much space for.
Sure.
But I always thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah, it is.
And then there was all this stuff with, okay, do we first talk about what are the different card types? Do we first talk about how do you cast a spell? Well, you can't really talk about that without talking about land, and you can't, and tapping and mana, and oh geez, at some point you should probably tell them they have to build a deck. And just trying to get all of that stuff in the right order, and then also because some of the rules are on the cards.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that nothing in the rule book is going to make what the thing says on the cards. Not work the way you want it to.
Right.
And so throughout this whole rule book, we're having to make sure that we're making very, very clear distinctions between things like losing life and taking damage.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because, functionally, you still end up with less life points, but how that happens matters depending on, what other cards you have. And, the whole long conversations about how to explain the difference between discard, buried, goes to the graveyard,
exiled,
killed, all those different things.
And some of those, and I think in some of those cases, and while you were editing original Magic, we didn't have the words yet for you're the concepts now. Like we know buried is different from exiled and goes, but it's the struggle to explain things consistently before we've really dialed in what those words are.
Yeah, well, and consistently and concisely enough fit in the little tiny rule book.
And on the card text.
Yeah, and fit in the card boxes. And the big long discussion until we came up with the metaphor of summoning sickness.
Right.
It was killing us trying to figure out how to explain that when you bring in a creature,
it
can't
doing
attack
anything.
that turn.
Yeah.
We started out saying, it can't tap.
Right.
So therefore it can't attack. But then you have Sarah Angels.
Right. And there's even, if Glenn Goddard's out there watching, he's laughing because he remembers when I was at War Games West, right after Magic came out, I'm on video telling people, that's the great thing about the Sarah Angel. Because it doesn't tap, it can attack the turn you summon it. It was totally wrong.
It was flat wrong.
Flat wrong.
Yeah.
And, so that was another thing that we just, kept going around, and all of this is taking place. All the discussions about this are taking place over email because the East Coast guys are in Philadelphia, and we're in Seattle. I'm in Seattle. You guys are still in Kent, and that's the other thing is I wasn't at the office
most of the time.
The basement office.
Yeah, you edited several WotC products without coming into the office to edit.
Yeah, I think in the end I never did edit a Magic set actually in the office. But and this is probably because they only have the one computer down there.
Right.
And you had to do dial-up.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm at home in this little home office setup thing.
Yeah.
That I've got going and
working over AOL.
Almost. But it's this whole little dial-up modem thing, and this thing is in the little desk where I'm at is in my bedroom. And so if my husband goes to sleep, I can't use the modem anymore because it's going, and that'll it's like, I have to get all the files I need downloaded. I have to send all the query emails I need to sale. And so all within certain parameters. And this is bad because I really work best in the middle of the night. That's kind of how I am.
And by the way, spoiler alert: a lot of Beverly Wizards '90s stories have to do with really rough working conditions.
Yeah.
So we got through that. Let's go on to Arabian Nights, because after working on Magic, is there anything else you want to say about original Magic?
I will say that because the rulebook got written so many times,
Yes.
I did end up calling in a separate freelance editor to just go through and do one more pass because
Because editors need editors.
Well, I'd seen it so many times that I couldn't see it fresh anymore, and so we had to bring in another person to take care of that. And
who was that?
Lance Kuykendall.
Okay. Wow.
And I'm really glad that you were understanding about allowing me to do that, because there was a certain amount of what.
Yeah, you're an editor.
Why do we need to?
You're an editor. You have perfect grammar. What could possibly could you possibly need an editor?
A question just came up because we were talking about the Sarah Angel card, for example. Right. Is that most people nowadays, they ascribe a bit of a personality to the card, right? And you'll still, so for example, you'll say, I'll put out my Sarah Angel rather than the Sarah Angel card. And but I think that's a more recent thing, right? Like before, it was just like use the Sarah Angel card or the Sarah Angel, right? And that's the terminology you just used as well when you were telling the story. So our chat is wondering if when and how that changed, and do we know?
I don't know.
I think it's always been more based on who the player was, because, like I said, I'm kind of a role player through and through, and so I would be saying my Sarah Angel, and in fact, I had like my Vesuvian doppelganger squad, and they all had names.
And I would say,
I knew which one was which by basically where I had,
Sure.
And I think before, in the early days of Magic, before we did the Pro Tour and before organized play became a big deal, Magic was more of a casual play environment, and it had, I would say, a much higher percentage of RPG fans, because that's where our roots were, than it did. And so I think maybe there was that all along. But all right, should we get to Arabian Nights?
Oh, sure.
Oh, boy.
Well, we've gone from original Magic. Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, by this point, we're still in my basement. You're probably still working from home most of the time, and Magic's come out, so we've got a trajectory going. This is late 1993, and Arabian Nights comes in, and that's our second Magic the Gathering product. What was your involvement in Arabian Nights, Beverly?
Yeah, so I was that's another set I was editing, and this time I was working directly with Richard. Because
Richard Garfield.
The East Coast guys weren't as involved with that set.
Okay. I mean, they were more involved in like the creation
of the base set.
Okay.
Because they did a lot of development work on it. But Arabian Nights was more Richard's baby.
Okay.
And, I was really excited about it because I love those stories, and he was great to work with and all that. But we had all these things with that set because we were sort of still figuring out what's the difference between an expansion and a base set.
Yes.
And so, I mean, we've talked before about the whole issue with were they going to change the card backs. And that was not, something I was directly involved with.
Yeah, it was a big Lisa Stevens moment.
Yeah. But the part that I got involved with is there flavor text on expansion sets.
Okay.
Because
alpha and beta did not.
No, they did.
Yeah.
Okay, they did.
Yeah, that flavor text for those was like this.
But it was kind of basic, if I remember.
It was this big group effort. Where it wasn't like it is now, where it's like a story that's on the cards. It was more just, let's find a Shakespeare quote.
Got it. Right.
Right. It was mostly literary quotes, and
sometimes just some funny little quippy thing somebody thought of.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, but in Arabian Nights, you decided this should be a little bit more involved.
Well, no, what happened is Richard didn't give me any flavor text.
Okay.
And so I thought there wasn't supposed to be any.
Okay.
And so I'm working away. I got the file done. I edit it through, and Richard approves it, and we think it's great. And I turn it in, and then I go off to dinner to celebrate.
Sure. Done. Did it. All right.
And, we're getting our food, and my pager goes off.
We had pagers.
Yes,
we did. But I remember when we got a whole pager thing. Like we didn't have cell phones.
Right.
Right. So we had a whole It came like there was a device that you had in the office, right? Like a charging station.
Yeah.
And you had a whole bunch of pages, and there was a way to
Sure.
operate. You know, it was all like hunt and peck on the menu system. Of this,
Okay.
and you could to set up what the numbers were of all the pagers, and you could send from this machine. You could send messages.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it was fabulous
And
technology.
90%
it was so
of the
cool.
90% of the messages were yes, we're saying you're sitting in ink,
Yeah.
Okay.
or
Just some sort of annoying thing. We had a lot of fun playing with the pagers.
Sure.
Yes.
but no, this one was a call in immediately sort of page, and so I thought, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And so I go find a payphone and call in, and it's Lisa and Vic, and they're like, "Where's the flavor text?"
Lisa Stevens. And
Yeah,
Vic
I can't
Worth,
find the
who-
flavor
Who were
text.
working on
And-
doing the layout for the cards to
And I
lay
said,
them all up to send a card
Yeah.
on Monday.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
they're laying them out, and they notice there's no flavor text because some cards don't have anything in the text box.
Oops.
Right.
All the
Yeah.
simple creatures
You're
that
thinking like
don't
a-
have rules
yeah.
text there.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
nothing.
Right.
Right.
And so they're calling me up going, "Where's the flavor text?" So I don't know. I didn't get any. Is there supposed to be
Yeah.
flavor
Right.
text? And they're like, "Oh my God, there has to be flavor text."
Oh boy. And when was the set due to be sent to Card Monday?
So it came out in December, I think, of '93.
Okay.
So that meant it would have been going to the printers around October, maybe early November of '93.
Okay,
and of course we would not have budgeted adequate time for
Of course
any of
not.
these
No,
steps of
no,
the
no.
process.
It all gets done
would
just
be like,
fine.
yeah, it's done with editing, and then it goes to the printer.
Done.
Right.
Step one, step two. All right.
Design, edit, print.
And at that point too, the process of getting the cards laid out properly was just insanely crazy because we had different platforms going on. I was working on a PC at home.
Right.
They were working on a Mac at the office.
Okay.
Dave was typesetting on an Amiga.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so pretty much anytime you
Nothing could go wrong.
yeah.
And hard drive, the sizes of hard drives were measured
Oh,
right.
in
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
1 or 2 digits of megabytes, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
So you, just so I can get the story right, you sent off the files, done, went out to dinner, and then the rest of the folks were typesetting on the cards.
They're laying them out.
Or they were laying them out. And at what point later on, was it within the next few days they were supposed to go to Card Monday for printing,
no.
or was it the
No,
next
the-
week,
It
or
was-
was it
it was
already
next-
overdue?
It was
or?
the next day.
Oh shoot!
And so
So what did you do?
She said, you got to write it. Me?
Okay.
Right now? And she said, yeah, because, you're an editor, so if you write it, then it will be perfect.
Oh,
It won't have to be edited.
sure.
edited.
That's how this works.
Well, and also because you had just edited all the cards, you were the closest to them.
You were the expert.
Yeah, I had the file.
And I'm sure they knew that you had checked out various books about Arabian Nights.
Yeah, I had
culture.
like 6 or 7 books that I had checked out, different
Yeah.
translations, so that I could
Sure.
check character names and
Yeah.
things like that. But I had taken them all back to the library, except
Oh, boy.
one, except one that I kept because I wanted to read it for pleasure.
And so what did you do?
So I'm like, okay, guys, we got to go home now. And we packed up, and I went home, and I sat there, and that's what I did that night, was write text.
Well, and your husband had to deal with the modem then, right?
Yeah,
Because-
and he let me get away with it that one time.
Rick, he's such a tough
And-
ass.
And so you wrote flavor text for
Yeah,
all of Arabian Nights
yeah.
within a few hours, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And it was late. It was this whole, we were laughing at how it was kind of a Shahrazad moment that
Yeah.
you're telling stories up in the middle of the night. And I didn't get flavor text on as many cards as I wanted to, but we got it on. We made sure there was something in the text box
Okay.
of everything, and
Yeah.
then
Send it
Oh,
off.
boy.
They got
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
Oh boy.
and we ended up getting in a little tiny bit of a legal thing later on because I had, I was looking for quotes just to make it faster.
Sure, yeah.
And so I had taken quotes out of this one translation by, I think his name is Hussein Hadawi.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And eventually somebody he knew saw it and said, hey, you're on these cards. And they came back and said,
Oops. You did
You-
not.
you used that word.
Yeah. No one told us about this. You can't just take it.
yeah. Well, and I had sort of hoped it would be fair use because there wasn't that much of it.
Sure.
But it was still a thing we should have
Yeah.
done better about,
Oops.
and we ended up giving them some money, I think. And
The Wizards of the Coast story, things we could have done better.
Looking back,
Looking
if only
back.
we had done this differently.
and it was just, it was a panic moment. It wasn't like I was
Yeah,
really thinking
of course,
super
no,
clearly about
no.
legal issues right then.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, so yeah, that's how that got done.
That's too funny.
That's Arabian Nights. Yeah. So let's move on to the Magic the Gathering series.
Yeah.
I think Legends has a story associated with it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at this point, at the point where we were about to do Legends, Wizards of the Coast had 2 editors.
Okay.
Because I had hired Jenny Scott, who later Jenny Scott Tynes.
Yep.
Okay.
To do the role-playing stuff so that I could focus on Magic, because it became clear I was not doing both. And we were carpooling to work and got hit by a taxi.
Oh no.
And both of us got whiplash so bad
Oh no.
that neither one of us could sit up or, do anything. And we were on painkillers and all kinds of horrible things happened. And so,
Bam, whole department laid
Yeah,
flat.
Well, I mean,
gone.
and that's why you have corporate travel rules now.
Yeah, exactly.
That your entire department should not be in the same bus or plane or airplane
yes,
or whatever.
this
right?
was
Like,
called the editing rule.
Yes.
So,
don't do this.
But at the time,
If only we had done this differently.
yeah.
Yes.
So, but at the time, sets still had to get
Yeah.
done.
So what'd you
And
do?
So we
Well, that's
ended
too
up-
bad, Beverly, but your deadline is next Wednesday.
And so what we did was I got a whole bunch of people who I thought had some pretty decent grammar spelling type abilities, and brought them over to my house. They sat around my kitchen table with the cards,
Yeah.
sheets and stacks, and I was lying down on my couch,
Yeah.
taking with trying to be on as few painkillers as possible so that I could function.
Sure. Oh my
And
goodness.
They would, and I'd say, okay, here's somebody show me a card, and they'd have a thing, and it'd be like, okay, is there anybody else who has a card that does this? Okay, well let's word it this way.
Okay.
And
Wow.
then
And so
they-
you're
and then-
directing.
And then they'd all go through the files and find their cards like that and word them that way. And okay, who else has a card? And then we just kept doing that.
Oh my gosh.
And then they would also come to me with things like, I don't know, what's the name of this card? What's the flavor text of this card? And we'd, and they'd hold them up, and I'd be lying on my back going, oh no, wait, that can't be like that,
Oh my goodness.
And
It's horrible. It's really funny,
it
though.
was, I know, and it was
But-
just sad.
Beverly, did you call her "get shit done" Beverly? Because this
Yeah,
girl is
of course.
I will do it tonight. I will write all the flavor text tonight. I have been hit by a car. It's fine. We'll make this happen. Wow.
No, Beverly's amazing. I mean, now you know why I wanted her to do these shows.
Yeah,
with us,
absolutely.
Beverly is just. I knew that if on the way to one of our shows, if she got hit by a car, she'd still show up.
She'd still show up.
Right.
Wow.
And,
Oh God.
then I'd go to the hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh goodness.
So yeah, and that ended up, it wasn't my best editing job ever,
Sure.
but it got done.
Sure.
And I was pretty proud of how the set came out.
Good.
Yeah.
And this was still a problem when we got to the
To
dark,
the dark, right?
because by then I was up and had been to enough physical therapy and things that I
Sure,
could sit
sure.
up for a while, but not for huge long periods.
Right. All right.
So the way we worked on the dark was I'd sit up and work on it for probably 3-4 hours, and then I'd have to lie down for an hour, and then I'd sit up and work for 3 or 4 more hours, and then I'd have to lie down for 2
That
hours.
sounds awful.
And and when I was lying down, I'd be on the phone to Jesper, and sometimes Steve
Who,
talking. to
Jesper Mirafors, the
Yeah.
original art director for Magic the Gathering, and for the first few sets after that.
and he was
Yeah.
also the designer for the dark.
and designer for the dark. Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah, I was talking to him about the story stuff,
Yes.
because that was one of the sets where we were actually trying to do a story sort of.
Right. Yes, you're right. Jesper had a vision for a set where it wasn't so much, it was the mechanics of the card, but also very integrated with his vision of what the art should be and what the story was behind the set. Really, I think a precursor, if you will, of what was to come in terms of Magic set design.
So yeah, there was a lot of talking on the phone about, well, does this suit with what this character is doing in the story
Okay.
and stuff like that. And
So I want to move on to. I mean, I remember so fondly, the excitement around magic.
Yes.
And I know that you were there firsthand, and you saw some of the world, set aflame by this amazing new product. And so I know you must have some stories about seeing that up and close and personal.
Yeah. The one that strikes me first is when I had quit my day job.
Right.
The guy who was my supervisor at the time was trying to get me to stay.
Sure.
At a law firm, right?
Yeah.
Because we know Beverly get shit done Beverly. And so, of course, your law firm didn't want to let you go either, right?
And
Yeah.
so I said, no, this is my dream job. I got to go do it. And he said, okay, well, if it doesn't work out,
Oh, well, that's nice.
go ahead and come back. And sometime not long after Magic came out, I just ran into him on the street.
Yeah.
Downtown,
and he's like, "How's it going?"
And he said, "So what was that thing? How's that thing that you were going to do?" And I go, "Oh, it's great. We got this new game out called Magic the Gathering." He goes, "Really?
That's what you're working on?
That's what you left us for?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's the best game.
Aww.
We have a whole league in the office."
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So
oh,
that was
man.
just like, yay me.
Yeah. Like, yes, that's absolutely what I left you for. I love that.
And then going to cons and stuff too.
Oh yeah, going to conventions. That was crazy back in those days.
So I'm always curious, and I've asked this a few times of our guests, is like when you joined on at Wizards, you said it was your dream job, and I think, but you can correct me, it was probably your dream job, not because you knew Magic was going to blow up and be this amazing, spectacular worldwide success, but more that you're going to be able to work on things you love, like RPGs and things like that, and like that's really cool, right? Who doesn't want to do their hobby? At what point did Magic's success kind of hit you? And you were just like, oh my God. Okay, so Gen Con 93?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. That first
that's
Gen
a great
Con
answer.
where we had product and we were selling it to people, and there was a huge line just stretching for forever. And
Now wait, do you really mean the first Gen Con in '93 when we released it, or the first Gen Con after that when with Legends?
no, the one where we released it.
Because
Yeah.
I
the first
recall there was a little
Hiccup with
snafu with the
inventory not showing up.
I know, but we did get it.
Yeah,
and we
we
were
did.
selling it.
It just
and
makes it, yeah.
So for the folks who don't know that story really quick, Beverly, can you give us the 15-second of that? Or the 20-second?
The inventory
Yeah, what
issue?
happened? What happened?
That part actually Peter should tell because
Okay.
I was...
Well, Gen Con in those days, like now,
Yeah.
is a Thursday through Sunday show.
Sure.
Exhibitors set up on Wednesday, expect to have their product. Wednesday, we set up, we got no product.
Right.
Shoot.
No product, no Magic.
No Magic the Gathering. No Magic the Gathering. And it's the big release. We've advertised this, everything. The whole company's riding on this. Thursday morning, no product. Thursday afternoon, no product. By the end of the day, Thursday, still no Magic the
Every
Gathering.
time this story just stresses me out.
Like, I'm going down to the warehouse, to the docks every couple hours and checking. Friday morning, no product. And Friday at about 2 o'clock or 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, suddenly we get the word Magic has arrived. And we go to get the Magic cards. Like a bunch of the people who were in line followed us back to help us carry it all. So imagine like 30 gamers all with boxes of alpha cases with alpha on our shoulders,
and
coming
that's
back
so
and
sweet.
opening it up.
That
and
is
then,
awesome.
And then, all right, Beverly, take their money.
Yeah.
And then, so how did you feel though? Like when this was happening, there was no product. Like, how did you, like, were you, like, I'm stressed out just hearing about it, but.
Honestly, this is just like, okay, just like everything else that happens at Wizards, stuff happens and we get through it and it comes out fine, and I'm just not going to worry about it because
I mean, that's a great attitude, honestly. Yeah, that is a great attitude. So you got product.
Yeah, and then my job, we didn't have like cash registers and fun stuff like that. We had a cash box and a calculator and
like a little pad of paper.
Little metal ones.
Yeah, one of those little carbon receipt pads.
Oh, sure.
And so my job was to write people's receipts for them as they went through the line. And so I was, you're doing this as fast as you can, going through, and people, and there's no stopping. And eventually it was like in the middle of day 2, my finger split open and started bleeding.
Oh, no.
And I was like, did anybody have a Band-Aid? And nobody did. And so Kathleen was sitting next to me because she was the one taking the money.
My first
and,
wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, what do I do? And she says, don't bleed on the money.
Thanks.
So
Thanks.
okay, okay, fine. I dug a tissue out of my purse and wrapped it around, and we soldiered on writing.
Again, I feel like Beverly.
So I apologize.
Beverly.
I apologize to anybody who I got blood on their receipts.
Yes.
I did not mean to do that.
I love it. And then so just people were coming. At that point was for you the moment where you're just like, oh my gosh, this is a thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's gonna be an even bigger thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to move. I want to get one more story around this topic that I know. I remember you in a Bessie Vaughn doppelganger costume. But I think it was year 2.
That was Legends year.
That was the Legends year.
Yeah. So we had this thing where some of us would dress up as magic characters.
Okay.
And I really love the Vesuvian doppelgangers, so they made me a Vesuvian doppelganger costume, and
That's awesome.
we got to go around and we actually had product that we were giving out.
Okay, in your costumes. Okay, cool.
So like one card at a time, off the top. You don't know if you're going to get a land or a rare or what.
Sure.
Right.
And I'm just passing these things out, and this is so much fun.
Yeah.
Because people are chasing me down.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make sure that I give stuff to like people who are not already big time players. And people who,
of course,
like kids and
sure, like
folks
you might be interested in this game.
Try and take this over to the Wizards booth and they'll show you how to play.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
I love that. Really,
And I got so excited about doing it that when I ran out of the product that Wizards was had given me to give out, I went back and got my shareholder box and my employee discount box, and I gave those away too.
Oh, Beverly.
And if I had any idea how much those cards were going to be worth,
you might have thought twice about that.
I might have, held some of them back, but
and that's interesting too. And I think that's another way Wizards was really revolutionary, because nowadays, like 30 years later, it is a not common practice, but if you really want to do that extra mile for your product, you hire a cosplayer and you have them pass out some of your product. And that's what you do. But that's not, like kind of what you did 30 years ago. You sat behind your booth and and that's still what most people do. But
or we had we drove. I never dressed up in a product in a costume, but you did, and some of our other employees did and stuff. Yeah. So hey, I want to get to another topic that I know is near. We're skipping some.
I know it happens.
Yeah, we know.
An hour is never enough. Right?
I know. But I want to get to this topic because I know it's so near and dear to your heart and mine, and that is, you had such an impact on the organization in terms of what our organization's values were as a company. Because, like me, I was like, this typical white guy from Idaho. I even wore a cowboy shirt today to kind of, I had no sense of sort of what sort of standards and sort of ethical behaviors that we should hold ourselves to as a company in those days, especially if you think about it, game companies are publishers. And I remember you telling me about how publishers have a responsibility in the way that we use language and media. And so you want to talk a little bit about about what you did for us in this topic? Well,
most of it was just trying to do things like use inclusive language.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff, like especially Primal Order and things, when we first got in, it's like, oh, the player does this and he blah, blah, blah.
Sure, and you're like,
and it's like, no, let's, see if we can.
And I want to point out, a lot of game companies now do this, but in those days, I didn't know any game companies that were using inclusive language on a regular basis. I mean, it was all, I think maybe White Wolf was doing it a little bit with Vampire the Masquerade, but, caring about, about that was not a popular thing in tabletop games.
Well, and we also talked a lot about like using example character. Like if you're doing example players, don't make it be Bob and Jeff.
Sure, mix it up.
Make it be, Bob and Maria.
Sure.
or make sure that you get names that aren't utterly white bread names and that aren't all guy names, and
right, mix it up a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. And some of the time we would use names from people that we knew, just to try to
of course,
spice it up some.
Right.
And also things like talking to Jesper about the art.
Yes.
And trying to, work with him. He was also, reasonably firm about wanting to have, not super sexist art.
Sure.
But he also, was very big on the artists getting to do whatever they wanted.
Okay.
And
trying to balance that.
And he was having trouble with that conflict. And so we talked about, well, but what if we just explain it to them as, this actually lets you do what you want more? Because you can, if you have to do just muscle-bound guys and chainmail bikini ladies, then that limits you.
Right.
But if you can do muscle-bound ladies and chainmail bikini guys, or
let's do it,
or whatever,
I'm in for this. Yeah.
Where
is this art?
If you, and just if you want to do something different, have a character who isn't white, have a character who,
right.
All that stuff.
Let's think beyond Conan the Barbarian, right?
Yeah, let's break out of that box. And then not only do we have art on there that is more representational, that where other people who are not your traditional gamer audience can look at that and say, oh, look, here's, me. Here's someone like me is in this game. Maybe they can play this game.
Right.
But you also just have more interesting art.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's more interesting to look at, right?
Yeah, it doesn't all look the same. It doesn't look like every other game company's thing. And all the stuff like the way that Anson did elves.
Yes. The Landmar elves.
The idea
one
that
of my favorite early pieces of Magic.
They don't have to be super pretty.
Right, like Legolas.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
Like,
they can be total punk rock guys.
And that was, I know, like for Magic, that was revolutionary again. Elves don't have to be those beautiful, tall, graceful, flowing creatures. I mean, they're still graceful AF, but they're also like tattooed and like they've got piercings and mohawks
and so it was just very much about breaking the mold and trying to make it so that all different kinds of people could feel represented and everybody could get more interesting stuff to look at and play with.
Right, because it's not just one type of person who plays this game, right?
Exactly, and the goal was to try to draw in more people and include more people, and that's kind of what got me. That when you're talking about what makes it my dream job, there was a lot of that too, because gaming, had been my hobby for a long time, and I wanted for a long time to feel like, me as a woman and other people like me, could belong more and not be this afterthought.
Right. I'm like, oh, you're a girl that plays games? That's so weird.
You would not even believe how many times I had to tell guys in game stores, well, actually I do know because I edited that.
I edited that.
I just feel like Beverly, you've been so much an unsung hero in the history of Wizard of the Coast for doing that, for creating, for helping us create a company that is known for its strong values that we have for inclusiveness and these values. And for me personally, helping me develop as a person and embrace these values myself. I mean, I don't know, it's really important. And we all thank you.
Well, I thank you for letting me and not making me argue with you about it too much.
Yes.
And I also really, it was kind of, it turned into a group thing in the end. I mean, this is something that a lot of people ended up being on board with, and I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I
strong
like that
people
too.
in the community, not just Jesper, Lisa Stevens, Richard Garfield. It became something that we all embraced
and tried to do, and we didn't always do it perfect.
And the people that didn't, we just kind of pushed them out.
Or sometimes they jumped before they were pushed. But
Right.
That's so wonderful.
And this actually specifically relates to a Magic thing that happened, because we had the card in Arabian Nights that was called Stone Throwing Devils.
Oh.
And the flavor text I wrote for that one was, sometimes those with the most sin cast the first stone.
Oh, shoot.
And because that was the whole, I'm in the middle of the night, I got to think of something to say about this card. You know, and Stone Throwing Devils was character, you know, there was a story about that in the tales where they were actual, you know, devils.
Sure.
But after the set came out, we had somebody write in and say, hey, did you know that's what Shamir called the Palestinians?
Oh.
That's a racial slur right there.
Oh.
And of course, it's a Middle Eastern set, so
Oops.
it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I missed that.
No.
Yeah.
We did this, and I was just thinking, what can we do about it? So I talked to Peter and Scaff, I think, and you know, we just said,
what do we do?
Well, we can't call it back because it's already out there, but
Right.
what we could do is promise that we would never reprint it. Because at that point we never planned on reprinting expansion sets anyway, and so you know, it's like I ended up writing the guy a really long apology, but I just didn't know that that was a thing, and we're so sorry, and we will never ever put that card out again.
Wow.
And then of course, you know, a couple years later, Chronicles comes along, and they're going to reprint cards, and one of the cards people have been requesting is Stone Throwing Devils.
And so what did you do?
So you know, I went back to Scap and said, we can't do it. We promised that we weren't going to do it. And
well, unfortunately, and you had moved off the Magic team by
I
then,
know.
but fortunately, Darla, in her wisdom, who we had on our show a few weeks ago, consulted you because it included a lot of the old cards. And so
I was able to say, oh wait, no, don't do that.
So did you put a different card with a similar mechanic in its place? Or?
Not for Chronicles, because that was all old cards, but they did eventually create a card that did the same thing with a different.
Yeah. So did you take it out of Chronicles? Did it stay taken out? Or?
Yes, it got out. Okay. We didn't put it in there. And Peter had to write a whole thing on social media or whatever to explain to everybody why we were doing that.
Right.
And some people were not happy, but
well,
other
I mean,
people
good on you for taking a stand. You know, I think that's really special, and I think that's really another thing that has, you know, really made, you know, Wizards of the Coast very special, and like especially the early years, is that you guys are so passionate, and so, I mean, everyone who's been on this show has been very loving, right? And like it may be uncool to say that, but I think it's true, right? Everyone loved what they were working on.
I love talking about love.
Right, absolutely. You know, and I think that's really interesting. I think that's something that sometimes we miss these days. You know.
Do you have another question from chat room? Or
I don't.
If not,
I don't,
okay. So I want to talk a little bit. We just have like 5 minutes left. I really want to kind of go through the rest of your career at Wizards really quickly, in a sense of like how you ended up, of course, running the editing department. You set the standards for. You really earned the title. Explain to me what the title executive editor was, and lived up to it in a big way by setting what the editorial standards were for the entire company. Not just about sort of inclusiveness and these things, but I remember Chicago Manual style, all these references that we set up, and one of the things that was our tendency, and this came up in our conversation with Brian Lewis, had a similar story, was in the early days, some of our tendency was that as we grew as a company, we all ended up taking on more and more responsibility. And I just kind of, as somebody who's always been sort of, well, at least for the last 30 years, an entrepreneur, my sort of natural tendency is to think that everybody wants to run a big organization. That's what I like
Not
doing.
everyone.
Not everybody wants to do that. And so we ended up, as we grew, you ended up accumulating quite a bit of power in the organization and responsibility. You had at one point, our game design and development, editing, art,
production,
which is like pre-press and printing, graphic design, all of these departments.
And project management.
Were all under you at one point in time.
That was scary.
That was scary.
That was not, as it turned out, a thing I was super, super good at. Because I could manage editing because I know what that is, and I can tell when people are doing it well or not.
Right, but managing programs and projects.
Well, and so many. I mean, if editing is just one department out of half a dozen or so. So what did you do when you figured that out?
I said, take me out. Take me out, coach.
Yeah.
I just want to go back home.
Make me an editor again.
So it's the only time in my career that I've had somebody come in and ask for a demotion. Yeah, we laugh, but I mean, that's serious stuff, you know? I mean, to go into your boss and say, you've given me too much responsibility. I really want to go back to what I thought my job was when I signed on to this gig and just be really, really good at running an editing department. Like, I know you said, like, I know I can do that super well, but I'm not doing all this other stuff well.
Well, and part of it too was that I was too far away from the hands dirty part.
Right.
I always wanted to work on projects.
Right.
And even when I was managing the editing department instead of working on projects, I always sort of hoped that there'd be like a few little projects here.
Yeah.
And then that they would come in that I could work on. And
Sure.
I edited something today. This is the best day, you know?
Right.
But when I was trying to run all those other departments, there was just no way. I just
Right.
didn't even come close to getting
Right.
to actually touch something. And that wasn't what I wanted to do. So when not long after I went back, we got the license to do the MLB Showdown game.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes.
And I said, nobody else gets to do that. That's
Because you love baseball.
Because I love baseball so
Right,
much.
yeah.
Right.
It's like, I know how to spell all these players' names already. So.
Well, and I like that story because I think it speaks so much to your character to say, and your self-awareness, awareness of your own truth, awareness of to not be caught up in this race for power, this, the kingdom building that happens within organizations, but to say, listen, if you let me just go back and do this job, I'll do a really good job at it. And so I always had so much respect for you for doing that. And I wanted to get that story out because I think it's an example for everybody, like in an organization. Seek out, you'll be happier, you'll ultimately be more successful if you find the place within an organization where you have the right job, the right level of responsibility, the right amount of responsibility for what it is that you're tasked. That's how you'll really succeed and be happy.
Well, and I think that's also important for managers of companies to understand, is that you're going to have a lot of people who are technical people, and they are technical people at heart. They have to have hands dirty working on projects from time to time, or they're just going to...
Well, and I remember in that same situation, my mentor at the time, Vince Galori, telling me, Peter, not everybody wants to run a big department or a big group of departments. Not everybody, you and I do, because Vince, you can just hear him. We're like that, but not everybody wants to do that.
And you have to make it possible in your organization for people, to advance while staying in place, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And find that role that really works for them, right? Where they can be most effective and happiest, right? And I think there's probably a home for everyone. I think that's a good piece of advice to end the show on, Beverly. I love that.
Yay.
Yeah.
Any last thing you want to get out before we...
I think we've pretty much been through everything I could talk about in 30 seconds or whatever we have left. So.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for being on our show.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beverly.
And thank you for coming in and watching. This has been Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. My co-host today, Kristen Jensen. Thank you. Also, our guest, Beverly Marshall Sailing. By the way, this is also our last show of season 1, so this is also a goodbye to Beverly for being on the show.
But not forever.
But not forever. Thanks also to Will Geisler for being our technical support and director, and Dominic, who was, I think, filling in a little bit for Kristen behind the camera.
Yeah.
Our next episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison is going to be at Gen Con, at the show on Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Gen Con time, Central time. And
East Coast time.
East Coast time,
Sorry.
excuse me. Yeah, thank you. East Coast time. Yeah. Ooh. Okay. And our topic will be about Gen Con itself, Gen Con history, telling stories behind the scenes of Gen Con. And we are going to have on that show Lisa Stevens, who's got crazy amounts of cool stories. He always has stories. Pick a topic. And Matt Forbeck is going to be there. He's been going to Gen Con forever. And Luke Gygax will be there to channel the spirit of his father, who founded Gen Con back in 1968.
That's right.
Yeah. So come and join us there. In the meantime, on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific time, we have the Brothers Murph. Come and check that out. And on Fridays at 11 a.m., we have table takes.
Yep.
Please come and check us out for that. And until our next episode, again, thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.